So earlier today, the season 2 finale of The Mandalorian dropped on Disney+. My mind is still blown. So today I'm going to stop and rank all 16 episodes of The Mandalorian from the worst to the best. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Share your ranking of all 16 episodes of The Mandalorian. My list is not the right list, it's just my list, and I would love to see yours.
I have spoken.
One more thing before we get started, over on my Patreon page, I have an additional Mandalorian video where I shared my complete thoughts on season 2, as well as kind of this 16 chapter journey in general. Join at any level and you can unlock that video as well as so many more. And if you sign up for annual pay, you can get all of my 2021 exclusives for just $21. If you're interested, the link is down below in the description, and let's get started. In last place, chapter 10, The Passenger. When it comes to the specific plot points in this episode, most of them are fine. The idea of him trying to avoid spider monsters, pretty fun little beat, as well as a nice homage to the Alien franchise. But the actual main storyline about Mando playing taxi, it just feels so inconsequential and lazy.
Not a great plan.
And especially now that we've seen the full 16 chapter arc for our main two characters, this is the one that stands out that just doesn't add much to that journey. But really the thing that solidifies this one in last place is that they added this weird plot line about Grogu eating the eggs of a sentient being.
Wow, that was weird.
Which in and of itself would be kind of a weird plot line, but then the episode emphasizes that they're afraid that their family line is going to end and they could go extinct, which just makes it really distasteful and seem like they didn't stop to think this one all the way through. Still, with all of that said, this is still an entirely watchable episode, just a very frustrating and disappointing one. Number 15, Chapter 5, The Gunslinger. Another side quest that just doesn't feel like it added much to the overall journey besides introducing a couple of characters that we see later on in the season. Follows a pretty familiar Western template of these gunslingers off trying to collect a bounty. But when you do those episodes, it really kind of is important that the central guest star be interesting, and the title Gunslinger in this episode is one of the least interesting and most boring characters of this entire show. The secondary guest star, Finnick, is way more interesting than the title Gunslinger. Oops! I'm also not crazy about Pelimoto, just a character that whenever she shows up, she just feels out of place. The acting doesn't feel like it's on the same show as everyone else. So you have an episode that basically the best thing about it is the introduction of Fennec and the tease of Boba Fett. Next up, Chapter 6, The Prisoner. As a point of reference, I think this is a very good episode. I just really enjoyed this show, and so something has to be low on a ranking. I think this one suffers a little bit from being kind of the third of these side quests in a row where Mando is hiding out with Grogu. And as you binge through season 1, you just kind of feel like you want to see some progress, not just off in another place. But as for the little quest that they go on, it's something a little bit different as they're trying to break someone out. It's great to get to see Mando in stealth mode, about taking out a group of guys on a ship. Some nice cameos in here. The officer on the ship has all sorts of ties to Star Wars lore through voice acting. So a solid episode. There just wasn't enough necessarily meat to it and big payoff to get higher up on my list. Then we have Chapter 2, The Child. In a lot of ways, this is just another rabbit trail where Mando forgot to lock his Razor's Crest, so the Jawas stole his stuff. So we go on this little journey to get his things back. But because of the events of this episode, it's really what sets in motion everything that happens with the series. If Mando doesn't form a connection and a relationship with Grogu prior to turning him over, then he doesn't go back for him. So the series needed us to have a little bit more breathing room to form those relationships. And so you just kind of have this little adventure with some Jawas battling a creature, and through it, we get our first look at Grogu using the Force, Mando in shock at what he's seeing, and this transforms his understanding of this creature and his role in the creature's life. Likewise, just having those character moments with Kuiil, our friend who has spoken.
I have spoken.
I think just adds a little bit of nice depth in here that while it's a simple episode, it's a short episode, it's certainly a side quest, the character stuff really does matter for everything that happens afterwards. Then we have Chapter 11, The Heiress. This is an episode that I think works best the first time you see it, and it loses a little bit of the shine on second viewings. Of course, it's awesome to see Bo-Katan in live action, played by the actress that voiced her on The Clone Wars.
Excellent!
We get to learn a little bit about Mando and how he's kind of in a cult and he doesn't even know that he's in a cult. And we start to see the pieces fitting together of all these different groups and factions of these Mandalorians are looking for the dark saber while Mando's on the run. The guy with the dark saber's chasing after Mando. And you start getting a big picture of how all the pieces will eventually fit together. But when you watch it a second time, the actual main plot line to it, it's a pretty straightforward, I'll do you a favor if you do me a favor episode, and it's pretty basic in the way that it plays out. A lot of really cool stuff in here, but on second viewing, maybe a solid mid-tier episode. Number 11, Chapter 4, The Sanctuary. A solid standalone episode. And what I thoroughly enjoy about this one is that it so explicitly borrows from the templates of a bunch of Westerns and Akira Kurosawa films, where essentially it's its own version of the Magnificent Seven or the Seven Samurai. Along the way, you were introduced to Cara Dune. I think it's just a nice little touch to see like what happens with some of these rebels after the war. What are they doing now? And so it tells a complete story in and of itself where you have Mando connecting with the villagers, that relationship with Grogu being expanded. And I don't know if this was intentional, but there's a whole sequence in here that's very reminiscent of Army of Darkness. But all in all, a solid episode that I find to be one of the more rewatchable stories. Bringing us into the top 10, Chapter 1, The Mandalorian. A great kickoff to the show that introduces us to these characters as well as this world and making it clear that this is very much a Western in the world of Star Wars. Our lead character is this ruthless bounty hunter that is dedicated to a very strict belief system. He's sent on this bounty that seems very mysterious as it's tied to Imperials, and we don't know exactly what's going on or whether our hero is good or bad, all leading to this final reveal of this cute little baby Yoda that challenges this ruthless bounty hunter, and we're not entirely sure why. It's quotable.
This is the way.
This is the way.
This is the way. I have spoken.
And it gives us just enough to give us that intrigue, create a mystery that we want answered. So we want to come back the next week and go on further journeys with these characters. Just a really good way to kick off a show. Number 9, Chapter 12, The Siege. Now this one starts off with essentially another you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back setup, and then it just turns into a thrilling and efficient episode. What at first glance looks like a side quest turns out to actually be very important for our lead characters as they learn Gideon is still alive, and they figure out kind of what he was trying to do, and they mention M counts. We realize there's a bunch of cloning stuff going on, and then it's also packed with action. Whether you're talking about running down corridors that reminds you a great deal of A New Hope, or this chase through this valley, there was a very cool sequence, or Mando showing up at the final moments to save the day. And even little baby Grogu gets a nice little moment where he steals some Girl Scout cookies and gets a nice little treat. So an episode that I went into a little bit skeptical and cynical, and it absolutely won me over. Next up, Chapter 13, The Jedi. Now, this is an episode that has absolutely fantastic moments and sequences, but the main actual plotline of the episode is a little bit thin. Of course, the big draw here is finally seeing Ahsoka Tano in live action, and Rosario Dawson absolutely delivers. And as she meets Grogu, we learn a whole bunch about our little friend, including, of course, his name,
Grogu.
And then as we get to the end of it, we learn that Ahsoka Tano is hunting down Thrawn. All that stuff. Awesome! You know, the main specific plotline about the city, it's just another you scratch my back, I'll scratch your back plotline. And I was just really disappointed at how much they underutilized Michael Biehn. And if they could have tightened up the central plotline of this one, it had all of the specific details to be much higher up on this list. Number 7, Chapter 14, The Tragedy. Now, this episode is very short. The plot is very thin, but everything in there is awesome. So you have Mando taking Grogu to this temple to try and find a Jedi to help train him, see if anyone can help. And throughout the process, several different plot threads established throughout the season all kind of come together. First off, Boba Fett actually shows up looking for his armor. And as a lifelong Star Wars fan, that's just cool. That's just awesome to finally see it. And then we have this other plot thread about Moff Gideon planning a tracker on Razor's Crest. And so then they show up and we just have like 15 minutes worth of action. And then stuff like even the Razor's Crest is destroyed. The Dark Troopers show up. Grogu is kidnapped. All these just kind of big, satisfying moments that you love to see. Coming in at number 6, Chapter 15, The Believer. To me, this is just a really nicely written episode that relies on story rather than fan service to get the thrills. And through the different worldviews of Migs and Mando, we really see Mando go on a journey. There's certain moments all throughout this show, and only a handful of them, where he has to make a real hard choice, where his value sets are challenged and they come in conflict, and he has to choose the child, and he takes his helmet off in front of others. But it's not just him. Migs also has a similar kind of arc. You see him as someone that wasn't Imperial and despises what the Empire did. Also, you get some great action here. There's this first chase that's a little Mad Max. You get a shootout at the end. But I really think it is those character moments that elevate this one for me, where you learn something about them and you see them grow. In 5th place, Chapter 9, The Marshal. Now, when this episode first debuted, I was a little bit frustrated by it because I think it works a lot better as Chapter 9 than as it does Season 2, Episode 1. As just a story in and of itself, and the next chapter, it's actually a really good story and one of the most developed scripts of all 16 of these episodes, where there's multiple layers to it. It takes its time to tell its story. It has some twists and turns all along the way. And of course, you have Cobb Vanth at the center of it. Just a really fun, cool character. In a certain way, its plotline is a little bit reminiscent of Chapter 2, but a much better version of people needing to take out a creature. I really hope that for these future shows, they kind of learn from episodes like this. They're just written with a little bit more sophistication, depth, and complexity that make for a more satisfying story as a whole. In 4th place, Chapter 3, The Sin. In a lot of ways, this is really where the story of The Mandalorian picks up. Everything before this was the prologue. You have Mando with the child, and he actually turns it over to the Imperials, causing his belief system to be challenged. We learn more about his childhood, the creed, what he believes in, and through what happened in the first 2 episodes, and this child is now a new version of what he was when he was younger. And in this moment, he humanizes it and he decides to serve the creature and makes this choice that is so important to him as a person, obviously to Grogu, and it sets in motion the events of the show. All of this leading to just some fantastic action as he sneaks into the base, takes a bunch of guys out, and then as he's about to fail trying to escape, all his Mandalorian buddies show up. We get this epic shootout. It's awesome. So you have real character moments as we discover something about Mando. He has development as he changes, and you get all the awesome action. This is some of the best of the show. Real quick before I give you my top 3, remember to share your ranking down below in the comment section. My list isn't the right list. It's just my list, and I would love to see yours. Also, I'm doing a bunch of Mandalorian content this weekend. Yesterday, I reviewed the new episode and talked about all the big reveals in there. Tomorrow, I'm going to be ranking the main characters of the show. Be sure to check out those other videos, and let's get back to it. In third place, Chapter 7, The Reckoning. While this episode might not have the fan service, big gigantic payoff, or epic battles of some of the other episodes, I think that this might be one of the best written episodes of the entire show.
You did it! Congratulations!
It has a little bit more complexity into the way the story is structured and the way that through the dialogue, we really get to know a lot of these characters much better. We learn about Kuiil and his involvement with the Imperials and understand kind of Cara Dune kind of resents that about him. Greef Kargan discovers the truth about the child, and that changes him fundamentally from a guy that just cares about being a bounty hunter to caring much more about a cause in general. We're introduced to our main villain, Moff Gideon, and of course the episode ends with one of the most tragic things in the entire show, that we lose Kuiil.
It's so hard to say goodbye.
All in all, a really nicely written episode. Our runner-up, Chapter 8, Redemption. A fantastic season finale for season 1 that has big, gigantic action, some nice Taika Waititi humor in it, and once again, we get to learn more about Mando and why did he do what he did. We see these flashbacks of his childhood, and we start to realize that the Mandalorians rescued him as a child. And when he sees Grogu, he sees himself as a child, and he's in that role. They did this for him, so he must do this for Grogu at any cost. All along the way, we also get this redemptive arc for IG-11 that was going to kill the child, and Mando absolutely does not trust him, and throughout the episode we get to a point in time that he struggles to even take his helmet off in front of this droid because he's decided that this droid does have value and then doesn't want him to sacrifice himself later on. So actually a lot of homages to Terminator 2 with what they do with IG-11 inside of this episode that I of course greatly appreciated. You get a nice final showdown with Mando finally using a jetpack, and then that reveal of the Darksaber, just some nice fan service that sets up where things are going in the next season, but just a tremendous episode with so much emotional satisfaction in big action. But coming in first place is Chapter 16, The Rescue, the culmination of everything that has happened up to this point in time, and it resolves everything in such a satisfying manner that makes sense in light of the story they've told and the world as a whole. Then once we get on our rescue mission, there's all kinds of cool action in there where you have Mando battling these dark troopers, Mando battling against the Darksaber, and then of course you get to the final little sequence of who's responding to the signal, and they actually had Luke Skywalker show up de-aged, and we got Luke Skywalker just destroying guys, and it was awesome. But it's not just that Luke destroyed guys, but this also means that Mando has to let go of the child, his child, and so he actually takes off his helmet, not because he had to on a mission, but because he has to say goodbye in as humane of a fashion as he can to Grogu. and you just see the completion of this journey that Mando has been on. And so for me, this is everything I love about the show. It paid it off so well. It was so satisfying, and it improved stuff that was a little bit weaker that came before, so it comes in at number 1. If you want to check out that bonus episode on my Patreon page, the link is down below in the description. If you want to check out my past Mandalorian content, it's right over there. Be sure to come back tomorrow for my ranking of the main heroes. Thank you so much for watching, and keep talking movies and TV too much.